Here we go. All right, can you hear me if I kind of walk around a little bit? Because that's what I tend to do. Well, thank you, first of all, for the opportunity to speak to this group. When Krista phoned me a few months ago, I kind of jumped all over it because, one of the things I always, Chris had mentioned earlier how he had a slide up there with all the organizations that WestGen supports, and I don't know if you remember, but right in the bottom in the middle was the Sacomaniacs, and I just want to put a plug in because you guys have supported that every year. So thank you so much to the board to help us do what we do. So Krista asked me to talk a little bit about. Let's bring that up a little bit. That's better. A little bit about the changing landscape and what we're manipulating and what we're doing on our farms to manage through the next set of changes. And I thought, okay, well, that's it's not a bad. Am I good if I keep walking around like this? Can you still hear me? Good, good. So it's not a bad idea to go back and look at the history first to see how we got to here. So our agenda today, we're going to talk about a little bit about the impacts on your farm, a little historical butterfat journey, why the changes, the component pricing adjustment that we're looking at in April of 2026, our consumer trends that are pretty much pushing this. What are you doing? Oh, does that mean I get to? Oh, that's awesome.
Now you'll be. Oh, I don't know.
From what I hear from the Japan trip, you just took care of everything.
Yeah.
And you just proved it. Can you hear me if I do this? All right. So consumer trends and what's driving them. The opportunities and challenges that you guys are faced with, you guys as dairy producers. And first of all, before I go on, this is a BC majority crowd, but there is some stuff here that pertains to Manitoba, Alberta, Saskatchewan. So all due respect to our producers out there, a lot of this is BC based because that's where I've been doing most of my work in the last 25, 30 years. And we're going to look at a component workshop scenario. But I wanted to start with this. Does anybody recognize this farm? Exactly. That's the one I grew up on, and that picture was taken in the late 60s. So we talk about managing change in 2026. This was the late 60s. So I don't know if there's a pointer on this, but the top barn on the right, 4 rows of 8 cows. That's what we had. We milked 32 cows. Surge buckets, belts, dump it in a pail. And you see this building over here behind the house? That was our milk house. So we had, my job as a kid was to carry the milk from that barn to that milk house, back and forth, back and forth. My dad wanted to expand to 40 cows. We only had 4 rows of 8 in that barn. So that other barn in the one corner, that's where we held our heifers. So we had to get the heifers out of there in order to put cows in that barn. So we would take the heifers out and put cows in there and then switch them around with that last row so we can milk 40 cows. That was the easy part. What my dad complained about at the time was the fact that we didn't have the quota for it. And somebody was telling him how many cows he was allowed to milk based on the quota that he didn't have, and he didn't like that. That was a change in the late 60s that my father, God rest his soul, he died on us 5 years ago, he didn't like that. We're facing change for the last 20 to 30 years in this industry that I've heard producers say over and over, I don't like the change, we're not going to be able to adapt to it, what are we going to do, it's going to hurt us. But we've been dealing with that since the late 60s. And by the way, the Red House was an Italian household, and the White House was a Dutch household. And we got along, so that's cool, right? So what's impacting your farm in 2026? The quick answer is a lot, and we've already alluded to this today from the previous speakers. We got the geopolitical stuff going on. The one that really bothered me was State 51. I don't know about the rest of you, but I did not like that. Climate change. I had atmospheric river put in when I sent this presentation to Krista, not realizing how many millimeters of rain we were supposed to get over the next few days. So people, human resources, and or succession. That is a huge issue today. I deal with it all the time. And now the component pricing adjustments that you guys have worked through over the last 30 years. So how do you position yourself for success? Well, all the good stuff. Principles of good farm management. You manage your interest rate risk. You prioritize your climate adaptation and resilience for the flooding and extreme heat that we've experienced. We recruit the next generation. That's not easy either. There's two hurdles when it comes to doing that. Number one, the senior generation's got to be ready to let go. And number two, the next generation's got to be willing and capable of managing that operation. And then we have to embrace technology, the agri-tech integration, and the utilization of consultants and nutritionists. And you're going to hear from a good one right after me. So let's take you on a journey, because I started banking in late 2005. And I'm a nerd that way. I track the numbers in the province, and I have this on my computer, and I track it every month. I can't wait to the 18th because I get the component pricing, and I can just add to it. So here we go, 2006. That's what our province produced. There was 618 of you. Your price per liter was 67 cents. You were getting $18 a kilo, and your butterfat was 372, and protein was 327. Starting in 2005, 2006, we started analyzing financial statements, and we would look at all the expenses, and we would separate out things like labor, we separate out interest, depreciation, and we would separate freight, take out freight and marketing. Everything else we would use as a cost of production. Oh, we also took out custom work. In 2006, what you were paying per kg shipped, on average, was about $7, $7 to $8. And you were getting paid $18.04. So let's go on. 2007, you see what the butterfat and protein done? How many producers we're at? And let's just follow that trend. This is end-of-year statistics, right? This is an average of the 12 months for that year. So in those 9 to 10 years, we lost 125 producers. In 2006, we produced 53 million liters of milk a month. In 2015, we were producing 63 million liters. We lost 125 producers, but yet you still produce 10 million more liters a month. You adapted to the change. We'll keep it going. I don't know why it did this, but this just wanted to, stress the point that we're making. But you see what you were getting per kg? You went from $18.04 per kg to $19.39 on average, based on the Milk Marketing Board posted pricing every month. In 2019, you see where we're going? 2020. Actually, let's back up a bit. In 2017, that's when we adjusted butterfat pricing. October of 2017, that's when your butterfat went up in pricing. How often have you heard, I think we heard it earlier on the Beef Talk, if you want producers to change the way they do things, pay them for it, right? So we adjusted the butterfat price, and we started to see this. 411, 416, 417, 414, 421, 428, 437, and 445. Since 2017, we've been pushing the butterfat out of our cows, right? You notice the other thing that stayed the same? Milk protein. Some farms will get 3.45 and 3.5 on certain months. But on average, we sit around 3.25 to 3.3 for 25 years. On average. And that's where we ended 2025. And we were getting $22.59. So remember that $7 number I mentioned in 2006, outside of all those other costs? That number today is around $14. So when you're looking at the squeezed margins a little bit, you were getting $18 back then, and that number was 7, and now you're getting $22.60, and that number is 14. So your margins have been squeezed a little bit, right? Down to 420 producers. It's actually at 423 as of today, thanks to the new entrants. 97 cents a liter. And that was as of December of 2025. And then the Milk Marketing Board announced a butterfat goal of 4.2 to encourage more milk and milk protein to meet the changing consumer demand. Last week I was in Red Deer at the Western Canadian Dairy Seminar, and it's 2.5 days long, and over half of the first day was dedicated to managing milk protein content, how to feed for it, and how to manage your butterfat. And again, you're probably going to hear a little bit more on that in the next talk. So this is a bit of a poll question. Do you believe that butterfat percentage is a predictor of gross margin? Who says yes? I'm talking to a smart group here. Who says no? Who says maybe? I saw one no in the corner, and that's the next speaker. Ian, you're right. Ian said no. And it is not. This is 65 herds from 2023 to 2024 on average of 2 years. And there's the 4.2 line that we want to get to. And this is their gross margin. So over here, we have someone at 4.7 who's getting what? Close to $11 gross margin. But over here, we have someone at 3.9 who's getting close to 10. And over here, we have a 4.1 at 11. So the butterfats are all over the place, and the gross margins are all over the place. Butterfat doesn't predict your profitability. It drives your quota. It tells you how much you got to ship, because you got so much quota, you got to ship it. But it's not going to tell you how well you're going to do. Does anybody disagree with that? Yet nobody said no but Ian. Thank you, Ian. Are you surprised to see that? I quite often got asked when I was in the feed industry, like, what's the magic butterfat? And again, we're going to get into the history of that, but I always like to think 3.8, 3.9, and a 3.3 protein is a healthy cow, right? Okay, so where's all the quota in Canada? This is where I bring in our Western provincial counterparts. You can see where most of it is. BC, we have 38.4 million kgs in 2025. So after I did this graph, this chart, I do have to make one correction. This 93.15, I double-checked that on my spreadsheet, and that is wrong, actually. In 2019, that number is 101%. So what this is showing us is how much quota we had at the end of the year, 38.4 million last year, and what we produced that year. Every year, us as a province, and I'm sure our Western provincial counterparts have done the same thing, we're pretty much close to 100%. Some years we're a little shorter, based on the quota that we've been allocated for that year. Again, you guys have adjusted to the change. We've got fewer producers, we got more quota, and we're filling it still. That old barn that we used to have, I remember when we went on test, you know what our BCAs were? 78. Like I remember as a tester back then, recording the cows that hit 100-pounders, because it just never happened. Now it's a common occurrence, right? We have had a history of change. So in the mid-1990s, when I was in the feed industry, low butterfat and high milk protein was encouraged. Anybody remember feeding through those years? I think all the guys with gray hair in the room remember that. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Corny. Yeah. What was that? What did I hear? Fat blockers. Okay. Yeah, that was the term at the time, right? Fat blockers. Okay, so we're going to get to that. You're jumping ahead, but you're right. So breeding strategy changed, right? Feeding strategy changed to promote lower butterfat. I remember the meetings at the Richard Smith office, and we were bringing it in, the butterfat blocker, right? We saw this a lot. 3.2 butterfat and 3.3 protein. Man, that was great on the milk check, though. It looked really good on paper. We reduced the buffers, we increased the grain forage ratio, we put the rumensin into the maximum level. I believe it's 22 parts per million. Is that still the case? You should know. We used specific oils, which was primarily fish oil, And we did finer chopped hay and forage. We did everything we could to drop the butterfat because that's what we were getting paid to do. And it made us money. But that happened. I had many customers that had issues like that. Can we all agree that a 3-2 butterfat and a 3-3 protein, a protein fat version is not the best thing for a cow? Pardon me? Yeah. But we were getting paid to do that, and the industry responded to the change. You guys, the dairy farmers, and the genetic advisors, and the feed people, they responded to it, and they were able to adjust to it. We did it so well that they implemented an SNF penalty to slow down the trend. Said, okay, that's enough. We've got I can't remember what it was. I think it was 2.13 or something like that. So you had to have a certain ratio of butterfat to solids, not fat, and protein. And that did slow it down for a little while. But why did we change to the lower butterfat? Because we have high butterfat stocks. And again, it was alluded to earlier. Butterfat and cream were deemed unhealthy. Like you shouldn't drink it because it was not good for you, right? And it was what the consumers wanted. When the Milk Marketing Board gives us I'm not going to call it mandates, gives us guidance for changing the direction of the components, it's not because they decided to do it. The consumers decided to do it. And they are your customer. And if you can't get the customer what they want, they're not going to buy it. So right now, we're going for the protein kick, right? And the revenue emphasis at that time was on the milk protein. So then in October 2017, the price got adjusted. We needed more butterfat. So then what happened? We increased our butterfat. We also maintained a milk protein. You would try to anyway. Our breeding strategy changed again. Now that's more of a long-term payback, but the feeding strategy changed to promote higher butterfat. So the protein fat inversion was reduced significantly. We started seeing more butterfat in cows. We increased the buffers. We increased the forage to grain ratio. We cut back on the Rumensin. We introduced palm fat oils. Dr. Lisa McRae mentioned that we've been feeding it for about 10 years. You're right, in 2017, that's when we started pushing it a lot to get that butterfat response, right? And we started feeding coarser hay and forage. We started to see the butterfat increase, and you saw that on the previous slides year over year. Does that make sense? And we really didn't need the SNF penalty because everybody was doing it anyway. I sat with somebody at our table. They said when they started milking, it was 3.6 butterfat, and now what are you at, 4.5? So you've been able to do that as well, right? And butterfat was deemed healthy again. That's what the consumers wanted. And that's a good thing, right? So why the change? Low butterfat stocks. Butterfat and cream were deemed healthy again. And then you go to your local Tim Hortons, and those creamers were 18%. I love them. Because that's what the consumers are screaming for. So our dairy industry in the Western Canada and throughout Canada have been able to adapt to that by providing the additional butterfat, even though we have less producers. You know how many kgs we produced last year? 38 million. We did it with 420 producers. Now we get to February 2026, which is actually taking effect. Today's St. Paddy's, so 2 weeks from now, right? 2 weeks from now, you're going to start seeing adjustments on your milk check. Right now, we're 85-10-5, butterfat, protein, other solids. Going to 70-25-5, and it won't be long before we get here. But for now, we got to deal with 70-25-5. Ontario's taking a more drastic approach. They're taking it a little further yet. But we have to adjust, and we will adjust to the 70-25-5. We're going to push for more volume of milk with less butterfat and maintained or even higher milk protein. I know that's the hardest part, but that's what we want to see, right? So let's just look at it theoretically and look at best case scenario from an industry standpoint, right? And this is where the bankers in the room can take note, right? Diane and BMO's here. With the increased quota, we're looking at 12,961 in our province. You can see what the other 3 provinces are getting. If it's at 12% more quota by the end of 2028, right? Our quota is worth 40,000. It's not quite at the level of Alberta, but that's another $518 million worth of quota. $518 million worth of new quota value based on 12%, right? $2 billion worth of quota value in Western Canada alone. Now, from an asset standpoint, that's awesome. Does it help your cash flow? Well, that's for you to determine, right? But that's the value based on current market value. When I was at the Western Dairy Seminar last week, I talked to 2 people in the industry from Alberta, and they told me that they think that quota is going to hit 100 grand. I don't know if it will or not, but that's what I was told by 2 people in Alberta. But you can see the effect of the value of the quota that's being handed out to meet the demands of the processors and the consumers. That's based on 12%. 12% quota, not the volume. The volume is going to be a little higher because of the lower butterfat. So what is the economic benefit to our industry? Assuming the increase of 12,961 kgs, and if we base it on 1.7 kgs per cow, which is kind of an average, I wouldn't have said that 2 years ago, but right now you're looking at 1.617, and about a 4.25 butterfat, which is what they want, that's 7,625 more cows. If we didn't increase the production per cow, and we had to fill that quota, we need that many more cows to do that in BC alone. And talking to a couple of contractors who build barns, barn only cost right now is about $7,000 a stall, and barn parlor and manure setup is about $17,000 a stall. That's kind of average. It'll vary. But if we had to build for that many cows, that's a $21 million investment in the industry. So you may have to go see your banker about that. Now, that doesn't mean everybody's going to be building for every cow, but this is the maximum potential economic value to the industry. So there's some positives to this, right? If we did barn, parlor, and manure investment, that's a $79 million investment. Diane, you ready to lend out on that? What was that? If a cash flow is there, yeah. So this is just a graph that kind of shows it. And based on $3,500 a cow, I know that I've heard cow numbers are $4,000 to $5,000 now. But based on that, that's $76 million worth of cows in Western Canada, if you had to buy every cow. This is the very extreme case scenario, but that gives you an idea of the range of the available opportunity within the industry. Does that make sense? Does anybody disagree with that? I mean, no, there's probably barns out there you can put a few more cows in, you can get a bit more production, and you won't be buying as many cows. But if we had to buy every cow to satisfy that quota, that's the kind of investment we need to make.
And you're based on a cow per stall?
Yeah.
Not 0% overcrowding.
1 cow per stall. Pro action, man.
Well, but the incentive there is immediate. As long as you know that you're going to be building when you plan making a change, you can increase it. Because it's just a question. Because, you know, my brother and I were planning on building a barn. We had expectations to fill our quota and buy quota after the barn built. But we actually found in the last 6, 7 months we actually been able to fill and exceed our quota before even building.
That's right, because you changed your production, right? Well, you had to. Yeah, you had to. This is based on maintaining the production level that we're seeing now, right? And we'll get to a little bit more on that later. That's a good point, though. So why the change now to lower butterfat again? Now, not the extreme that we saw in the mid-90s when we were pushing it down to the 3.1, 3.2 butterfat. Well, the processor's requirements versus consumers' demands. Improved processing technology to encourage and increase manufacturing of new dairy products. One of the presenters last week at the Western Canadian Dairy Seminar talked about all the different aspects of milk and how many products are available. And I was actually mind blown by how many different features of milk they can make products out of. It's not just milk and cream and butter and yogurt. We produce and sell whole milk, but our customers demand milk parts now, not just straight milk. Some processors want more butterfat. Some processors want more protein. This is not driven by the milk board. This is driven by the consumer. And through the milk board, you guys get the message about the altered milk price change. Butter stocks increased 13.3% from December of 2024. So we've done our job on the butterfat. Now, I'm sure none of this is new to most of you. I mean, the reason why you're here is because you're quite aggressive and doing well on your farms, and you stay up on things. So you probably are aware of a lot of this stuff, but it's good to talk about and discuss amongst each other. The current consumer consumption trends, try saying that fast. Yogurt, over the last 2 years, in 2024, it went up by almost 1%. In 2025, it went up by 8% year over year. And incidentally, when you make crema yogurt, like Greek yogurt, you need 6 times more milk to make that yogurt versus a regular yogurt. And people are buying it off the shelves. Ice cream went up to 4.3 from 2024. Butter, 2.7 to 4.2. Cheese went up a little bit. Cream, look what cream did. Look what milk did. Look what cottage cheese did. Cottage cheese is a sexy protein right now. My wife buys it all the time. We talked about the Ozempics and of the world and the protein kick. This is what complements it, right? That's what the consumers want. And that's what we need to provide them. So what are the opportunities? Well, of course, we're going to have increased processing capacity of 50% in Western Canada. Vitalis is investing significant dollars to provide capacity with an agreement with the Western Dairy Pool, demonstrating commitment from producers and processors to the dairy industry and our customers. That's important. That is important. We have to provide a product for them, and we have to set up the processing facilities to be able to do it. Okay, so we've got the 12% growth in the industry forecasted. We are seeing a lower feed cost right now. I think things may change with, what was alluded to earlier with what's going on in the world. But right now, we've seen lower feed costs. We got a question? Until it's given to you by the end of 2028? Yeah. We've got full bunkers right now. I've had many of our clients say, I don't need to buy as much hay this year because I have extra hay. The cover crop was really good the year before. So we've got full bunkers right now. So that's a great opportunity. We do have lower interest rates. They're not as low as they were in COVID years when we hit the 2.45 on prime, but they are lower than what they peaked at 7%, right? So what are our current challenges? Some people look at the 12% as a challenge. That's why I included it in this slide as well. My barns are full, I can't, I'm levered up to here, I can't afford to build a new barn, and I can't milk any more cows. So that 12% is a challenge for them. Again, the 70-25-5, some people look at that as a challenge. Adjusting their milk components, right? Going to 60-35-5, if 70 is a challenge, 60 is going to be a bigger challenge for you. The leverage levels. The average dairy farm in BC is carrying about 26 to 28,000 per kg debt right now. You try to build a new barn on top of that, you got to cash flow that. Back to what Diane said. If it cash flows, right? Of course, the trade negotiations coming up with our friend across the line. Who knows where that's going to go and how that's going to affect us. We know what the last round of trade talks did. We saw dairy direct payments as a result of the CUSMA payments. We don't know what we're going to see this year. And of course, Mr. Trump, I think he's a challenge for everybody. What can you do? You can manage your ration. You utilize your nutritional consultants, your feed companies to maximize your milk protein and lower your butterfat. They've done it before, you've done it before, they can do it again, and you can do it again. You review and amend your breeding program to focus. This is a plug for WestGen. WestGen advisors can help. Again, that's more of a longer term fix, but you want to start implementing that if you haven't done so already. Make sure you have that. If you are in a position where you can invest the capital to expand your operation, have open communication with your lenders earlier than you need to. If your annual review time is coming up, use that as an opportunity to have that discussion with them, what your future plans are. Understand your financial position. Does everybody here know what their debt service coverage ratio is? One guy, yeah. Is anybody well below 1? Or in the 1-to-1 territory? What 1-to-1 means is if you owe $10,000 a month on payments, after all your bills are paid, you have $10,000 to service that. So you're 1-to-1. How much room for buffer do you have? Nothing. Yeah, you have no room. If you're sitting at 1.2, you've got a little bit more buffer. So when you're sitting with your lender, whether it be at annual review time, there's 2 times you're going to hear about this. Number 1 is your annual review, and number 2 is when you're looking for more money, because they're going to calculate that out to make sure you can pay it back. That's your debt service capacity. And what your cash flow is, what we call EBITDA, right? That's what you have left over after you service all your payments. Does everybody here know what their feed cost is per kg? Most of you will, right? You're going to be in that, depending on what province you're from. Because in Alberta last week, I saw $5.90. But I see a lot of $7 to $8 in that range per kg. So on a per cow basis, depending on what your butterfat output is, you'd be around $10, $11 per cow feed cost, right? On a per cow basis. But I don't care per cow. I always go on per kg. Direct cost of production. So when you look at the direct cost of production, that's your feed, your breeding, your vet, your sawdust. You can throw in your hoof trimming. Some people include milk testing. And that's usually, when you add the feed cost in there, that's usually $9 to $10. So think about that when you're looking to swap in quota. Your direct cost of production, just on that, including those items, is going to be in the $9 to $10. You're getting paid $22. You're going to swap that in for $10. You've already paid $10 to make it. You got $2 left, and you haven't paid the labor for it. So people often ask, like, what's the right number to swap in? Well, it depends on what your number of cost of production is, because that will vary. Because dairy EBITDA can vary widely. So this is showing $9.07 per kg shipped for dairy EBITDA. That doesn't include intercompany transactions, and it doesn't include, that's most of your cash costs. On average today, and Diane can correct me if I'm wrong, you're sitting in the $3 to $4 range for every kg of butterfat shipped to service debt. Same thing with the whole farm gross margin. That's after cost of production. So here we have a gross margin graph with a variance of $4 from the top to the bottom. Everybody's getting paid the same, but we've got a better profit margin over here. It is possible to manage your herd that way. Everybody's getting paid the same price every month, but yet over here we have a much tighter profit margin. This is going to limit your borrowing ability. This is going to give you some opportunity to expand and grow. So it's up to you to work your way over to the green. Or how do you stay ahead of the pack? If we go back to, I'm going to speak to this graph first. This is a graph put together by our friends at FCC, so I am borrowing, plagiarizing their work, but it was actually public work. They put it online on their last report, and it was actually presented at the Western Canadian Dairy Seminar last week. So this is an easy one to find. You can find it online. So if you're sitting at 4.5 today, and your protein's at 3.2, on the new pricing structure, you're looking at a 1.4% drop in your revenue for the year. But you bring your butterfat to 4.4, it's going to drop to 0.8. All you got to do is get your butterfat to 4.3, and you're almost a break even. That's kind of a snapshot, and you can look that up online under FCC for that information. The reason why I highlighted those two, this is what last year's average in BC was, and this is what the month of December was. So we're in that 0.7% range, loss of revenue. if everybody had those components, but not everybody has that component. This is just a range, right? So if you're at 4.2 butterfat and 3.2 protein, you're actually going to make some money. So find that online. It's a good snapshot to kind of say, hey, this is where I am and how do I fit in there? Is your arm up? Yeah.
You said you'll make money. Have you paid the cost of shipping all that, making that extra?
No, this is just based on your components, not extra milk.
So you're saying we're equalizing, but there's more cost to produce. So we haven't made more.
No, I don't necessarily agree with you. If all things being equal and your production stays the same, but your components shift, and I'll show that in a graph later, in a chart later, there's an opportunity to come out revenue neutral even a bit ahead. Like if you do nothing else, we all know that butterfat and protein fluctuates on a monthly basis. If you start to see your butterfat start to drop and your protein hold, like so if you went from 4.5 to 4.3, but kept your protein, you haven't changed anything else. Yes, that's true. Yeah, but I'll get to that on another chart. You'll see that. But this is just a kind of a linear snapshot, right? Sorry, I got hockey on the brain. Sorry. So the Milk Board's coming out with a calculator for you to utilize, and it's going to look like this. I apologize for the quality of the slide, but this is what the layout's going to be. And the only thing that you can input on this is how many liters you ship and how many kgs of butterfat and protein and other solids you ship. And this will calculate what your difference is based on with your current butterfat, protein, lactose test. So I don't know if it's live yet. Has anybody seen this live on the Milk Board website? No, not yet? Okay, so it will be, and I did ask permission if I could share this, and they said yes. So the only thing that you won't see on that is the butterfat, protein, and solids on the top there. I added that in just so I can understand what components this was reflecting. But this will give you an opportunity. You could plug in your last milk statement, plug in these numbers on the production data, the liters, the butterfat per kgs, protein, and other solids, and it'll calculate what your current milk price would be and what it will be on the new structure. So you can see here at 4.6 and 3.3, there's a 0.39% drop, and that's in line with the previous chart that I showed. You'll be able to find this online. I don't know if it's online yet, but they have assured me that it's going to be, to make it easier for producers to calculate the change. That make sense? One thing I had to get my head wrapped around was how they came up with the price per kg. Because I thought if the December price was $22.50 at 85%, that's what the butterfat was paid. That's not how it's worked out. It's worked out based on the pool of money that's available that month from the processors, right? So it's actual hard number. So in this case, for this particular producer at 4.6 and 3.3, the price now is $22.54. It's going to be $23.72. So this is a comparison. This is something that I put together overnight, and I actually shared it with the Milk Board, and they thought it was pretty cool. And I'm sure the feed companies are doing the exact same thing. I've talked to a couple of producers today, and I asked them, like, how are you going to be when the new pricing comes in? And they've said they've talked to their consultants, and they've run these numbers, right? So in this particular instance, this is a 268 kg farm, and I use that number because that's the average kgs of butterfat shipped per IRMA number today. If you take how many kgs we shipped last month and how many farms there was, it's 268 per IRMA number. Yes, I know that some farms have more and some have less, but this is a 268 kg farm, and they're sitting at 4.85. I'm sorry for the small print, but 4.85 and 3.4. If they take it down to 4.35, they're actually losing out on, it's going to cost them $45,000. If they take it down to 4.25, and in this case, I increased the milk production per cow. So he went from 35 liters, and this was one of our customers who actually did this. He went from 35 liters to 38 liters, and his butterfat did drop to 4.2. He only had to milk 3 more cows to fill that. Now, to Tarz's point, we added in the additional feed cost per kg and the additional direct cost of production, which was the vetting and all that, and the freight and marketing for that additional volume of milk that was sent out. He came out ahead. This just demonstrates, and we could do this, we do this with our clients on a one-on-one basis, because you can throw scenarios at this all day long, all day long. But this just shows the potential for what can be achieved through a combination of increased production, reduced butterfat, and I know it's easier said than done, but a few more cows in the barn. If he didn't raise his milk to 38 when he got the 4.2 butterfat, you're right, Tars, it was 20 more cows in the barn. And 20 cows at $1,000 a cow today, right? Just seeing if everybody's still awake. That's about a $100,000 investment. So you're right, there is a cost to that. So it's a combination of managing your herd numbers, managing your components, and your production. In this case, with our client, his actual feed cost was lower than what his last fiscal year was, and we're seeing that more and more now. How many were here for the 23 cost of production study at the dairy conference? Numbers weren't great, right? They are starting to look better. When we look at the 24s, they're looking better. Feed cost is a little less, production is a little better. Things are looking better from that respect. And you'll see that next year at dairy conference. And I'm just going to put a shout out. I'm doing all the COP for MMP and BC. So for those of you who are on that and haven't finished your workbook, you're going to be hearing from me by next week, because that has to be in before the end of the month. So what are the current trends? We are seeing increased gross margins. We are seeing it in general. We are seeing slightly better cash flow. That goes hand in hand with gross margins. Of course, beef on dairy, $1,000 for Holstein bull, and up to $2,000 for beef cross. That number is going to vary. We heard larger numbers earlier today.
I think you missed.
But who would have thought that would have been the case, right?
I think you missed.
But your replacement cattle, back to Tarz's point, we need a few more cows in the barn. It's going to cost us a bit more than it did a few years ago. I remember about 4 years ago, I did talk to mainland young milk producers, and we talked about raising your own heifers versus buying all replacement stock and filling up your barn with nothing but milk cows. And actually, we did a study on 3 farms over 5 years, and they actually came out ahead at that point buying all replacements. I'm not sure if that would work today at $5,000 a cow. Matter of fact, I'm sure that wouldn't work today at $5,000 a cow. And we are seeing less pressure on operating lines.
Is it recording?
When I talk to farmers, I ask them that. I don't see it as often as I did when I was working in the bank, because usually when, as a banker, one of the first things, I don't know if they still do it in the morning, Diane, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but by 10 o'clock you have to take care of the excesses, right? And usually by the 15th of the month and the 28th of the month, you start to see a bit more pressure on the operating lines on certain dairies, on a lot of dairies, because they're waiting for that milk check, right? We are seeing a bit less pressure on the operating lines, which is a good thing, right? We are seeing lower interest costs relative to 21 and 22. Prime sitting at 4.45. It did hit 7.2, not 7.25, but 7.2. My mic still on? It just died? They muted me. Oh, does that mean I'm up? My time is up? Is that your way of... a nice way. I'm almost done. So we are seeing low, prime got down to 2.45. That's the lowest we've seen it ever. I know we still have a client who's sitting on the 10-year at 2.7 because he locked in for 10 years back then. We are seeing lower feed costs, and Ian can speak to that as well. We're seeing land price kind of stabilize a little bit. I mean, it's done what it's done, but we've seen it kind of stabilize. Look at the FCC report for last year. And of course, we've seen the quota price increase, right? It's at 36.5 for the longest time, and now we're kicking 40,000. You're getting up, so I'm almost done. Okay. And we have the current status of trade negotiations. So those are all things that we're dealing with right now. And we're getting processing capacity increase, not just Vitalis. We can't just blame everything on Vitalis and give them all the credit. Natick is putting a new plant in Surrey. Dave, it's close to you. Is it almost done? I hear they're a little bit behind schedule.
Physical structure is pretty well
Right, so we've got 2 processing facilities, gonna be up and running in a couple of years, and I'll just put a plug in Ridgecrest, it's doubling the size of their facility as well. So we're seeing more processing activity, being willing to invest in the industry, as long as you give them the milk, right? And this, we've seen a lot this year, I pointed to that earlier. It's just gonna make me stay on here longer, you know that.
They're only 50% charged.
Oh. Again, a nice way of saying get on stage, right? Is that better? Well, you gotta do your thing. All right, so we're seeing increased cottage cheese and yogurt production and consumption, right? So what's the summary? You guys have adjusted well. The industry has adjusted well. Reduction in farm numbers does not mean reduced production overall. 1,200 in 1990. I moved here in 1990. And believe me, I keep track of numbers. We had 1,200 of you in 1990. We're down to 423 starting in 2026. In the mid-90s, we pushed for low butter fat. We switched to more butter fat in 2017. And now we want to reduce it again and increase milk protein and more volume. We're getting 12% more quota and 18% more volume. Producers have adapted to change. Feed companies and genetics are aware and capable of assisting producers to manage their production and quota. They've done it before, they can do it again. And with that, I do thank you for your time, and if there's any questions or disagreements, please see me after.